There was another violent incident this morning in Toronto involving transit workers. A suspect chased two Toronto Transit Commission employees with a syringe. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but it's just the latest in a string of attacks against TTC workers and even pedestrians. The president of the union, representing 35,000 transit employees across the country, is calling on all levels of government to do something about it.
As we're seeing the increase in violence and becoming more and more problematic, the swarmings, the unprovoked stabbings, today's incident of someone running around with a syringe, it's only a matter of time, unfortunately, before these injuries become catastrophic.
Let's bring in the CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick, who's watching this story for us in Toronto. Megan, what is the head of the Transit Union of Canada calling for here?
Well, Hannah, he does say that these incidents are alarming, and he is calling for what he describes as a national strategy to tackle violence on transit systems. So what he envisions is municipalities across Canada, provincial governments, the federal government, and transit agencies sitting down together, he says, to come up with concrete recommendations to improve safety for both staff and passengers. He mentioned in that clip about potentially something catastrophic happening. It has happened. There has been a woman who was stabbed on a TTC train last year who died of her injuries. There have been, as you were just mentioning, a number of other incidents just in recent days alone. He said that incident today with the two staff members being chased reinforces and helps him make the case for the need for this national strategy. He's saying both short-term and long-term solutions are needed, including more training for workers on de-escalation, for example. He said more resources need to be put into training and staffing. And he said this isn't a problem just isolated to Toronto. This is happening in transit systems across the country. He said workers are often the victims of threats, verbal abuse, physical altercations, being spat on. And they don't even know how much this is happening, Hannah, because he says so many incidents likely go unreported in addition to the ones that we're hearing about and are making headlines.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we also heard from the Toronto Mayor, John Tory, on those violent attacks. What did he have to say, Megan?
Yeah, he just spoke a few minutes ago saying he's, quote, deeply concerned about these incidents, and it's getting a lot of his attention lately. He said he's convened multiple meetings recently with the Toronto Police Service, with the TTC, and the union representing TTC workers, the local union for local branch of the ATU. He says another meeting is coming up this Friday, and he's hoping it will produce more measures that can be implemented, again, in the short term and the long term. Mayor Tory also issued a statement calling for what he describes as a mental health summit. Again, he wants municipalities across Canada, provincial and the federal government, to sit down and talk about more funding, more resources for mental health care in this country. But as it relates to transit safety, here's a bit more of what Tory said about what riders are facing these days.
The vast majority of the millions of people we move every day, the system is and has been safe. But we have to make sure we take additional steps to reassure people and to make sure that our operators are also kept safe, because of course that's extremely important in light of some of these events that have happened and instances prior to that.
And just to note, Hannah, we did hear from the federal government on this today. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was asked during his media availability about transit safety in Toronto in particular. He said if there is a role for the federal government to play here, then it will step up. So we'll see if anything happens. It sounds like a lot of the stakeholders, including the head of the TTC, Rick Leary, who was on the CBC Radio's Metro Morning this morning, everyone's talking about wanting to find solutions to improve safety. So like I said, we'll wait and see if any further meetings or cooperation or anything comes out of these calls for a national strategy to address transit safety.
Okay, Megan Fitzpatrick in Toronto. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Police are investigating and transit unions are calling for action following a string of violent attacks on Toronto Transit. So for more on this, I want to bring in Sarah Kennedy. She's the president of the Ontario Special Constable Association and has experience in transit patrol. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Let's get right to it. What do you think of this recent increase in violence that we're seeing?
I think it's obviously very tragic. It's unfortunate that people are experiencing these acts of violence while they're just trying to get to and from work, to and from, their places of business, or picking up their kids, or just, wherever it is they're going. They should be able to feel safe, and they should be able to get there safely. So it's obviously very concerning.
Let's talk about the challenges, the challenges that are faced when trying to keep riders and staff, too, safe in settings on multiple transit lines, multiple buses, and underground trains. And even, it was one woman who was hit with a BB gun, a worker, before she started her shift.
Yeah, there are many challenges, and the Ontario Special Constable Association is a strong advocate for our members to try to achieve some changes that will make it safer for all the environments protected by special constables, but especially in transit. Special constables there needs to be more of us. There simply aren't enough special constables on patrol at any given time, and that's obviously creates a big challenge. There's a big geographical area that needs to be covered in order to be able to adequately respond to calls for service. And when there's just a few officers on hand, then it's not, you can't expect a very fulsome response. And also, we need to be able to get to those calls. There are certain realities that we're facing that are prohibiting us from being able to do our jobs better. We need to be able to get to those calls for service. We need to be able to have lights and sirens on our cars so that we can actually get to the call. We need to be properly equipped with the right tools so that when we get there, we can mitigate and de-escalate the situation, either bring it to resolve it entirely, or at least make it safe until our police partners can get there and resolve it. So, we need better equipment.
Yeah, so you're talking about better equipment. Are you protected? What type of equipment would you still need, and what type of equipment would you have to resolve these situations?
Well, there are better tools than what are currently employed. Right now, special constables throughout Ontario are they're carrying batons and pepper spray for the most part. Some version of pepper spray, or it could be a gel, or a spray, or a foam. And a better tool, a more appropriate tool, and it's better at de-escalation, is actually a CEW. And as far as equipment, our vehicles need to be allowed by the Ministry of Transportation to be equipped with lights and sirens, so that we can actually get to these calls and be able to help.
Let me just jump in there. Sorry, it's just the acronym that you use there. What is you wanted a piece of equipment that you still needed
Sorry. A CEW, it's well known as a taser, but a CEW, it's a piece of equipment.
Oh,
yep.
Known as. You're right.
It's known as a taser. It's referred to as a conducted energy weapon, but it really is 80 to 90% of the time it's effective at de-escalation simply by demonstrating it. It results in less injuries to the public, to officers, and it's a tool that we can use at a distance. We don't have to be close range with somebody who's violent to use that tool. It's certainly needed. It would help. It would definitely help officers once they actually get to the call to be able to resolve it safely and without hopefully and preferably without any injuries to the officers or the subject.
For you and your perspective, we're seeing all these incidents. Are there numbers to show that it is increasing, in particular in the Toronto area?
I'm not an expert on the numbers.
Okay.
On the numbers in the Toronto. I mean, I think the TTC would better be able, and the Toronto Police would be able to. But the lived experience is that officers are experiencing more violence towards them. They're going to more calls for violence, violent-related calls, and I think we've seen that trend over the last few years.
Now, we did hear from the Amalgamated Transit Union just this hour, I think it was, and they're calling for a task force involving all levels of government, so to tackle this violence that we're seeing. What do you think of this? This task force, they say, would do everything from, trying to get changes, more visibility of maybe people like you on the ground or authorities, also dealing with mental health issues. What do you think of this task force idea?
Well, as an advocate for special constables, I'm never going to say no to anything that's going to get more of us employed and also better equipped. However, I think that the current government has what it needs to be able to achieve this. The Ministry of the Solicitor General and the Ministry of Transportation. I think the provincial government has the the mechanisms in place. And I would need to know more about what this task force would look like. But I would like to see an integrated response. I think acknowledging the mental health struggles in our community alongside the resource issues that law enforcement and public safety professionals are experiencing. Addressing those issues might be what helps the problem.
Yeah. So just to give our viewers an example of a number, 1.8 million people ride Toronto transit system. Almost all of them get to work or get home without incident. So these recent incidents, how much should we make of them? Should this signal anything to us? Just coming back to you and your profession.
Oh my God.
I think so. I think it should raise questions. I think people should say, are we kept safe? Are the people who are employed to do it adequately equipped to do that? Should they be better equipped? I think we should also ask ourselves, these incidents that happened, the unfortunate incident today and yesterday, and the very high profile incidents, those get reported to media. But every day there are things that are going on in these environments protected by special constables that aren't necessarily reported. So I would just, I think that's probably worth noting.
Okay. Sarah Kennedy, I want to thank you for your time today and for the good work you and your other constables do.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
You're welcome. Sarah Kennedy is the president of the Ontario Special Constable Association.